Behind some of the most trusted labels on your liquor store shelf lie lawsuits, deceptive marketing, and bottles that cost 5 times more than they should. Today, we are ranking 10 famous whiskey brands that are not what you think. And trust me, number 1 involves a $2.5 million class action settlement. 10. Basil Hayden. That sleek bottle with the metal buckle looks like it belongs in a gentleman's study. Basil Hayden positions itself as the refined choice in Jim Beam's small batch collection, sitting alongside Knob Creek, Baker's, and Booker's. The marketing whispers sophistication. The price tag demands $50. Jim Beam created this brand in 1992, specifically to capture drinkers who wanted premium without intensity. What they do not mention is what is actually in the bottle. Basil Hayden is bottled at 80 proof, the legal minimum for bourbon. Meanwhile, Knob Creek sits at 100 proof. Booker's comes out at cask strength, often above 120 proof. Old Grandad 114, which uses the exact same 27% rye mash bill as Basil Hayden, delivers 57% more alcohol for $25 less. Same recipe, same distillery, vastly different value. The finish disappears almost before it arrives. Reviewers at Breaking Bourbon describe it as reminiscent of a really watered-down whiskey, and note the mouthfeel is on the thinner side. Whiskey critic Jim Murray gave it just 78 points, calling it dilute. One podcast reviewer called it a $15 whiskey masquerading as a $40 whiskey. Here is the real insult. Basil Hayden dropped its 8-year age statement in 2014, meaning the bourbon could now be younger while the price kept climbing. You are paying for the packaging and the positioning, not the liquid. Jim Beam already makes a budget version of this exact recipe called Old Grandad. They just gave it a fancier bottle and tripled the price. The Emperor has no clothes, but he has an excellent marketing team. 9. Bulleit Frontier. Whiskey. Walk into any craft cocktail bar and you will find that distinctive orange label. Bulleit built its empire on frontier imagery, rugged authenticity, and the legend of Augustus Bulleit's 1830s recipe. The tagline, Frontier Whiskey, suggests dusty trails and Kentucky heritage. Tom Bulleit claimed to have revived his great-great-grandfather's recipe when he started the brand in 1987. The reality tells a very different story. For years, Bulleit bourbon was sourced from Four Roses, then later from various contract distilleries. The rye still comes from MGP, a massive industrial facility in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, that supplies over 50 different brands. That 95% rye mash bill on Bulleit rye is the exact same recipe you will find in George Dickel rye, Templeton rye, Smooth Ambler, and dozens of other bottles at lower prices. Diageo, the multinational beverage conglomerate that owns Johnnie Walker, Smirnoff, and Captain Morgan, bought Bulleit in 2001 as part of the Seagram's acquisition. They finally opened their own distillery in Shelbyville, Kentucky in 2017, investing $115 million. But for 16 years before that, they sold sourced whiskey wrapped in frontier mythology to customers who thought they were buying craft bourbon. Allegations. The company also weathered Sirius. In 2017, founder Tom Bulleit's daughter Hollis publicly accused him of abuse. Former master blender Ebony Major filed a lawsuit alleging racist and anti-Semitic remarks that were not appropriately addressed. Tom Bulleit stepped down as brand ambassador in 2019. Diageo disputed aspects of both accounts, but the reputational damage was done. Buying. You are not buying craft whiskey from a small Kentucky operation. You are buying corporate whiskey from the largest spirits company in the world, dressed up in a very convincing costume. 8. Jefferson's Ocean. Jefferson's never distilled a single drop of whiskey. They source bourbon from various distilleries, likely including Barton, then apply creative finishing techniques and charge premium prices. Their most famous expression, Jefferson's Ocean, supposedly ages at sea. The concept sounds romantic. Barrels cross the equator multiple times, visit 30 ports, and experience constant motion that allegedly accelerates maturation. Jefferson's has completed over 26 voyages and charges $70 to $90 for the result. Here is the problem. No other major bourbon producer has copied this technique, despite Jefferson's doing it for over a decade. In an industry that chases every trend, that silence speaks volumes. The science is questionable at best. Temperature fluctuations on a ship do not replicate the Kentucky climate that actually develops bourbon character. You cannot rush time in a barrel with motion, and barrel experts have raised serious doubts about the caramelization claims in Jefferson's marketing. What you are buying is a story and a gimmick from a company that has never made whiskey themselves. 7. WhistlePig. WhistlePig markets itself as a Vermont farm distillery. The aesthetic is pure New England charm, rolling hills, heritage agriculture, and the promise of American craft whiskey. The flagship WhistlePig 10-year costs $80 to $100. It is aged in Vermont. It is bottled in Vermont. But it is not distilled in Vermont. That 10-year rye comes from Alberta Distillers in Calgary, Canada. It arrives in tanker trucks, crosses the border, and gets bottled with pastoral Vermont imagery. The small print on the label says "Product of Canada" if you look closely enough. The company did start their own distilling operation in 2015, but their flagship expressions remain primarily Canadian-sourced. In 2016, the board attempted to remove founder Raj Bhakta amid allegations of fraud and mismanagement. He survived the coup but left the company's reputation bruised. You are paying premium American craft prices for Canadian industrial rye wearing a Vermont costume. 6. Hudson Baby Bourbon. Tut Hill Town Spirits in New York's Hudson Valley pioneered the American craft distillery movement. When they launched in 2005, there were fewer than 100 craft distilleries in the entire country. Hudson Baby Bourbon was their flagship product, sold in distinctive small bottles with handwritten labels and a premium story about farm-to-glass production. The price was $40 to $50 for just 375 milliliters, half the size of a standard bottle. The whiskey inside was aged approximately 3 months. Standard bourbon ages for years in 53-gallon barrels. The slow interaction between spirit and wood creates complexity, smoothness, and character. Hudson used 3-gallon barrels and claimed the smaller size accelerated maturation because the higher surface area to volume ratio speeds extraction. They also played bass music at the barrels, calling it sonic maturation, claiming the vibrations enhanced aging. The accelerated aging theory has some scientific basis. Smaller barrels do extract more wood character faster, but extraction is not maturation. You get more oak flavor, but you do not get the oxidation, evaporation, and chemical transformations that time provides. The result was harsh, wood-forward spirit that tasted young because it was young. Critics savaged it. Reviews described wet cardboard, airplane glue, and licking a car tire. Fred Minnick called it one of the worst bourbons he had ever tasted. The tiny barrels created aggressive, immature spirit that no amount of marketing could disguise. William Grant & Sons acquired Tut Hill Town in 2010 and eventually discontinued Hudson Baby Bourbon after years of criticism. The craft distillery that helped start a movement became a cautionary tale about what happens when marketing promises outrun the liquid in the bottle. Time cannot be hacked. Patience is not a gimmick. 5. Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Blue Label sits behind glass at liquor stores, glowing like a trophy. The deep blue box, gold accents, and $200 price tag promise the pinnacle of blended scotch. What you actually get is a masterclass in luxury marketing over substance. Johnnie Walker Blue carries no age statement, meaning the youngest whiskey in the blend could be relatively young. It is bottled at 40% ABV, the legal minimum. It is chill filtered, which strips out flavor compounds for visual clarity. Whiskey critic Jim Murray scored Blue Label 88 points while giving the $92 Ardbeg Corey Vrecken a 96.5. Diageo sells over 1 million cases of Blue Label annually. The blue bottle has become a status symbol, the scotch you gift when you want to look generous without knowing anything about whiskey. Meanwhile, Johnnie Walker Green Label, a vatted malt bottled at 43%, offers more complexity and character for $60. Blue Label succeeds because of the box, not the bottle. 4. Macallan 12 Double Cask. Macallan has mastered the art of brand tax. Auction houses sell rare bottles for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Collectors treat Macallan like blue-chip stocks. That prestige trickles down to the entry-level 12-year, which commands $80 to $100 on American shelves. Industry estimates put production costs for a 12-year Speyside single malt at roughly $15 to $30 per bottle. You are paying a $60 to $70 premium for the name alone. The liquid itself is bottled at 40% ABV, chill filtered, and colored with E150A caramel for consistency. Those are minimum specifications dressed in maximum marketing. Macallan's parent company, Edrington, has brilliantly positioned ordinary releases as must-have status symbols. The whiskey is fine, pleasant sherry notes, gentle oak, accessible sweetness. But fine does not justify the price. When Glenfarclas 12, bottled at 43% with no coloring added, costs half as much and delivers more character. You are paying the Rolex tax for a Seiko watch. 3. Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Fireball dominates shop menus across America. That little bottle with the demon logo has become a cultural phenomenon, especially among younger drinkers. Sazerac, the company behind Buffalo Trace and Pappy Van Winkle, sells millions of cases annually. But in 2023, class action lawsuits exposed what those mini bottles actually contain. The full-size Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey contains Canadian whiskey with cinnamon flavoring, bottled at 33% alcohol. The mini bottles sold at gas stations and convenience stores are labeled Fireball Cinnamon. Subtle difference? ED, and contain zero whiskey. They are a malt beverage blended with wine and natural whiskey flavoring, bottled at just 21% alcohol. This formulation allows Sazerac to sell them in over 170,000 stores without liquor licenses. Anna Marquez filed suit in Illinois. Other plaintiffs followed in multiple states. U.S. District Judge Edward Chin ruled the labeling could affirmatively mislead consumers into believing they were purchasing whiskey and denied Sazerac's motion to dismiss. The fine print says with natural whiskey and other flavors, a phrase designed to confuse rather than clarify. Sazerac knew exactly what they were doing. They created a product that looks identical to their whiskey, uses nearly identical branding, sits in the same impulse buy locations, and contains no whiskey whatsoever. When customers complained, the company pointed to the fine print. That is not transparency. That is legal protection for deception. You think you are buying whiskey. You are buying flavored malt beverage with whiskey mentioned somewhere in the ingredients. The demon on the label is more honest than the lawyers who wrote that label. 2. Angel's Envy. Angel's Envy positioned itself as a revolutionary bourbon finished in port wine casks. Founded by Lincoln Henderson, a former Brown-Forman master distiller, the brand promised craft innovation. The distinctive bottle and approximately $50 price tag attracted bourbon. Curious drinkers nationwide. Here is what the marketing does not emphasize. Angel's Envy sources its bourbon from undisclosed distilleries. The base spirit is likely a standard 6-year bourbon that gets dressed up with a port finish. Bacardi acquired the company in 2015. Lincoln Henderson passed away in 2013, and no Henderson currently works for the brand. The bourbon itself is bottled at 86.6 proof on the lighter side. Critics frequently note that the port influence overwhelms rather than complements the bourbon character. Many reviewers argue you are paying for a gimmick that masks a mediocre base spirit. The finished bourbon trend that Angel's Envy popularized has since been executed better by competitors at lower prices. You are buying the memory of innovation, not innovation itself. 1. Templeton Rye. Templeton Rye built one of the most audacious origin stories in American whiskey. According to their marketing, this was small batch rye from Templeton, Iowa, made using a Prohibition-era recipe favored by Al Capone himself. The story went that farmers in this tiny town secretly distilled rye during Prohibition, creating a whiskey so good that Chicago gangsters demanded it. The bottle featured a quaint small-town aesthetic, premium pricing, and promises of Iowa terroir. It was almost entirely fiction. In 2014, a class action lawsuit revealed that Templeton Rye was actually distilled at MGP in Indiana using their standard 95% rye, 5% malted barley mash bill. This is the same commodity recipe sold under dozens of other labels, including Bulleit Rye, George Dickel Rye, and Redemption Rye. The Iowa connection was nothing more than bottling location, but Templeton went further than just obscuring their source. Court documents revealed they hired Clarendon flavor engineers to add flavoring compounds that gave Templeton its distinctive taste profile. This was not traditional rye character. This was engineered flavor designed to match what they claimed was a historic recipe that likely never existed. There was no proof of any Prohibition-era recipe. There was no evidence Al Capone ever drank Templeton whiskey. The small batch claim was meaningless marketing language. The entire brand identity was built on romantic lies about Iowa farmers and gangster mythology. The lawsuit resulted in a $2.5 million settlement in 2015. Templeton was forced to remove small batch from their labels entirely. They removed the good stuff and Prohibition-era recipe from their marketing. Every bottle must now state distilled in Indiana in clear lettering. The original founder walked away from the company he built on deception. You can still buy Templeton Rye today. The label looks more honest now. Some people even like the taste. But you should know exactly what you are drinking. MGP commodity rye with added flavoring compounds and a heavily discounted origin story. When a company will deceive you about where their whiskey comes from, when they will invent gangster endorsements and fake historical recipes, when they will hire flavor engineers to artificially create character, they are telling you everything about their relationship with the truth. That is not whiskey making, that is storytelling, and you deserve to know the difference before you spend your money.